When someone finishes a drink and drops it into a blue recycling bin, they usually picture a highly efficient local system. A truck picks it up, takes it to a facility just outside of town, and melts it down into something new. In reality, that blue bin is often step one of a massive 7,000-mile international supply chain. For decades, Western municipalities collected millions of tons of plastic, paper, and metal without processing it themselves. They packed it into shipping containers, loaded those containers onto cargo ships, and sent them halfway across the world. Instead of managing their own discarded materials, developed nations simply paid to export the garbage out of sight, relying on a global logistics loophole rather than domestic green infrastructure. The destination for nearly all of these ships was China. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, an exploding industrial sector and a massive workforce meant Chinese factories desperately needed raw materials to produce goods, making cheap foreign waste highly desirable. This animated flowchart illustrates the core economic loop. The West shipped its sorted waste to Chinese ports. Processing facilities there extracted the usable plastics, fed those materials into manufacturing plants to build cheap consumer goods, and then sold those exact products right back to Western consumers. As the cycle accelerated, recycling transformed from a local public service into a lucrative global commodity exchange, generating billions of dollars in revenue across the entire supply chain. But this meant the entire waste management strategy possessed a fatal vulnerability. It relied completely on a single nation willing to buy the world's trash. Down on the ground at Chinese ports, the incoming material rarely matched the pristine, sorted plastic promised by exporters. It arrived as highly contaminated, mixed household garbage, heavily polluted with rotting organic matter and unusable scrap. In 2016, an independent documentary film titled Plastic China bypassed the major ports and took cameras directly into the unregulated rural towns where this material was actually being processed. The footage showed immense mountains of imported plastic waste covering entire landscapes. It revealed the grim reliance on unprotected manual labor, documenting citizens and young children living and eating directly inside toxic sorting yards. The stark contrast between the West's sanitized blue bins and the ecological devastation in China sparked massive public outrage, leaving the Chinese government with no choice but to intervene. In 2017, China implemented a sweeping environmental protection policy designed to shut the system down completely. They called it Operation National Sword. The policy established a strict contamination limit of 0.5% on imported recyclables. Because Western waste was so highly polluted, this mandate functioned as an immediate, total ban on foreign trash. The effect on Western municipalities was instantaneous. Sorting facilities that had spent 30 years selling baled plastic suddenly realized their sole buyer had permanently locked the doors. Cargo ships already en route to Asia were flatly rejected at Chinese docks. Back in the West, local facilities quickly ran out of physical floor space, with shipping containers and massive bales of trash piling up endlessly at port terminals. Cities that previously factored recycling sales into their municipal budgets now found themselves paying steep landfill fees just to dispose of the materials they had collected from citizens. Operation National Sword violently snapped the entire global recycling supply chain overnight. Western waste brokers frantically redirected their cargo ships south, aiming for smaller ports in Malaysia and Thailand. However, lacking China's capacity, these smaller ports were overwhelmed, prompting their governments to rapidly enact strict bans on foreign garbage. Ships full of rotting recyclables were left wandering the oceans, repeatedly denied entry as developing nations collectively refused to absorb the environmental damage. The tactic of treating poorer countries as a convenient disposal site for Western consumption was permanently cut off. With the export loophole closed, developed nations faced an inescapable reality. Massive, towering bales of compressed plastic in local facilities had nowhere left to go. This crisis became a catalyst for change. Without the ability to hide the volume of waste they were generating, governments faced increasing pressure to aggressively ban single-use plastics at the source. The transition was not immediate or smooth. Many cities simply canceled their recycling programs entirely, sending tons of plastic directly to landfills or incinerators. Only after this initial failure did municipalities begin the slow, expensive process of investing in the domestic infrastructure needed to process materials at home. The closure of the global waste trade finally stripped away the distance that made Western consumption feel invisible. Today, the volume of plastic produced is no longer an export commodity for another country to manage, but a domestic reality that every nation must now solve within its own borders.